Chapter 44. Radioactive. We passed through to the final arena, at least that was my hope. Before going more than a few steps, I looked around. For pedestals lay out on the edges of the arena. At the center, a huge blob of stone sat like a mountain. How much do you want to bet that that thing comes to life when I touch the first pedestal? I asked. I don't bet. I sighed in exasperation. Seriously. I'm always serious. I smacked him on the chest with the flat of my hand. It did nothing except hurt my hand. How could a teenager be so hard? I shook it out as I looked around. I was going to try and be smart this time. I walked to the first pedestal, keeping my distance in case I triggered it. I wasn't ready for this monster yet. The first pedestal held 6 blades. They were all different colors and sizes. They looked incomplete. None had handles or anything to hold on to. I walked to the next pedestal. I held pieces of what looked to be a hilt. They were laid out neatly. I could see the handle part, the bar part, the leather for the handle thingy. I didn't know much about making swords, but I had used plenty of them. I walked to the next one with Engandriel as my shadow. This one had a few gears, a crystal, and some technical-looking wires and things. The last pedestal held a vice grip, an anvil with a hammer, and some crystal dust type thing. I think we have to make a weapon. Engandriel didn't say anything. I wasn't really expecting him to, and anytime he did open up his mouth, he wasn't very helpful. So, I think I will start with the blades first. Maybe I can run at the big baddie with one of them, and that will give me some time if I can injure him. Then I can assemble the hilt and put whatever techno stuff that goes in it from those 2 pedestals, then bring it all over and smash it together with the anvil. Does that seem like a plan enough to you? Engandriel frowned. Have you ever made a sword? Nope. It shows. If you're so smart, then you do it. I can't. Can't interfere. I'm well aware. So, we either go with my plan or I distract him while you build the sword. Which one ends up with me dying? He narrowed his eyes at me. Right, so good luck. I ran for the first pedestal. I snatched up the longest blade that was purple. I used my hoodie to wrap the bottom so it didn't cut into my hand. It still ended up slashing my sweatshirt open and biting into my hand. The ground rumbled beneath my feet as I ran forward with the blade outstretched. The mountain of rock in front of me moved and shifted. The surface of it turned black and red, moving like liquid. It lurched towards me. The ground around it steamed, melting in the clouds that swirled around it. I slowed. My insides felt hot. It wasn't coming from the outside like a heat source. Instead, it felt like my body was vibrating. My stomach churned. I turned and vomited. I stumbled back. I wasn't sure what kind of monster it was, but I don't think I was going to get close enough to stab it. I'd have to give it a wide berth. It continued towards Engandriel. I used the slingshot to pelt out some stones at it and try to draw its attention, but it still continued on him. I went to the second pedestal and collected some of the items. As I touched them, the blob monster turned his attention back to me. I grabbed the bar thing and the handle thing and sprinted towards the third pedestal. The monster continued to follow me. I went to set down the handle and the bar thing down, but realized they had fused together in my hand. I picked up the gear and the crystal. The blob monster approached. I could feel myself getting sicker. I jogged to the fourth pedestal. When I reached there, the gear and crystal had disappeared into the handle somewhere. I set the purple blade down on the anvil, then promptly vomited again. I stumbled towards my guardian angel. When I reached him, I grabbed the pedestal with one hand to keep from falling. He hadn't done anything with the blades. His eyes darted to me. Are you okay? I dry heaved and chucked the partially made handle on the table. How did you? He started. I just can. Help me. I gathered up the blades in one hand with my hoodie sleeve and began stuffing them in the front pocket. When I was finished, I dragged my feet back towards the second. The blob continued its steady progress towards us. Engandriel hooked an arm under my torso to help support my weight. Flee, cursed. I can't. Something's weighing me down. Shit, I grumbled. I leaned on him heavily as I pushed onward. We reached the second pedestal. Engandriel went to grab the last few pieces of the handle, but quickly pulled his hand back. What? It zapped me. I couldn't help but scoff. Really? He nodded gravely. I guess I really can't interfere. I spit. My stomach felt like it was boiling. I reached for the last 2 items for the handle, then stumbled to the next. Engandriel scooped me up in his arms. My fingers worked, but I didn't seem to be in control of them. When we reached the third, the handle was in one piece. I picked up the springs and wires. My hand started shaking. The angel jogged to the last pedestal. The handle was complete. I leaned over the table, pulling the blades out of my pocket one by one. Blood streamed down my hands into my shirt sleeve. My hands worked as my eyes watched. Engandriel looked over his shoulder at the oncoming blob. Can you hurry? The look of worry in my eyes would have given me pause if I had any control over what my hands were doing. Instead they just continued on squeezing the blades together, hammering at them and connecting the handle. The blob was almost on us. I felt faint. I could barely keep my eyes open from the pain. I wanted nothing more than to curl up and die. I could see the skin on my hand starting to redden and bubble. I finally pulled the sword free from the vise. A golden sliver of cloud escaped my lips. It wrapped around the sword in my hand. The solid blade of silver sparkled with all the colors of light. I felt a oneness with it. This sword was mine. This sword was me. My strength started to return. I leveled the sword at Engandriel. Move! I whispered and jerked my head to the right. Engandriel stepped to the side. The blob was just feet away now. The sword glowed surrounding me in light. It filled me with energy. I used that energy and projected it at the monster. The blob slowed and stopped. Its black surface stopped moving. I moved around the pedestal holding the sword high over my head. The blade grew 3 times the length. I brought it down with both hands, slicing the monster in two. It shattered into dust as the sword broke its surface. I stumbled to one knee. I had done it. Somehow, some piece of me had done it. My inside still churned. The sword shrank in my hand to a small dagger. My eyes went wide. Did you see that? Engandriel knelt and picked me up. The look on his face was full of concern. You look too pale. I held the dagger up in front of him. Did you see it? He nodded as he lifted me up. It's very cool. Are you worried about me? Oh, wait a second. I squirmed out of his grip. As soon as my feet hit the ground, I retched one more time. My knees shook and I almost fell. Engandriel's arm wrapped around my torso to hold me up as I bent over. I straightened. Okay, I think I'm good. Let's get out of here. Engandriel nodded. He picked me up again, then walked us through the last threshold. We exited the walls back out onto the open clouded plain. He launched us into the sky and started zipping across the realm. I watched the golden sun across his features. I never noticed how much expression he actually had in his features. Like the one right now looked like total worry. I blinked my eyes. They were starting to get heavy. I focused again on his face. The last look I saw from him was adoration. Chapter 45 Return. I lay cradled in Engandriel's lap. I knew it was him without opening my eyes. I could feel his strong aura of lightness. It was hard to describe it any other way. I was wrapped in a wool blanket with my head on his shoulder. His arms held me around the torso and legs. I kept my eyes closed tight. I didn't want him to know I was awake yet. As much as he hated me, I really liked being this close to him. My stomach was still a little achy and my throat was raw, but overall I was feeling better. I could feel the weight of the Aurora sword in my pocket as just the small dagger. I could feel the energy come off of it. That feeling of ownership was powerful. I wasn't sure how I was going to give it up to Karma. Her hard eyes haunted my memories. Right. That was how. She was a scary bitch. I finally registered what had woken me. There were voices. Engandriel was speaking with someone. I liked how his voice rumbled in his chest beneath my ear. I can't believe you let her get hurt. She almost died. I recognized that voice too. That was Remy. The pure worry in his voice was surprising. I can't believe you let her summon Karma, Engandriel whispered. There was definitely a note of anger in his voice. You can't stop her when she gets something in her head. Why'd you even go with her? She couldn't have gotten there if you didn't take her. I can't interfere. Don't give me that bullshit line, Remy spat. You know she had to get the sword at some point. She might as well do it while she's young and at the top of her ability. She almost died. She wasn't ready. Did you want to go with her? Do you think you could have done any better? You know I can't go there. Right. And you'll have your chance when she gets the other one. Now get out of here before she wakes up. I'm not leaving. I don't trust you with her. And I don't trust Karma. A low growl issued from Engandriel. I liked the way it vibrated from his chest all the way into mine. I couldn't help the sharp breath I took in from the pleasure of it. Engandriel shifted me in his arms. His hands tilted my face up towards his. I slowly opened my eyes. The gig was up. He knew I was awake. I looked up into his ice blue eyes and his handsome sharp features. Are you okay? He asked. His eyes were full of worry. I nodded slowly. Water. I managed hoarsely. In a snap, a bottle of water was in front of my hand. I followed the arm to Remy. He gave me a half smile as he twisted the lid off for me. I grabbed it in both my hands and lifted it to my lips. My hands were still red and crispy from the last monster. Remy saw them and scowled at Engandriel. I didn't dare look up to see the angel's face. I sipped a little of the water. It was hard to swallow. My throat felt so tight and dry. Drink some more, Engandriel encouraged. He helped me lift the bottle up to my lips again. He was very careful not to drown me. This drink was easier. I could finally feel my throat start to open up. The water hit my belly. It made me feel queasy again. I squirmed. He was sitting on the tailgate of my truck. Engandriel released me as I wiggled out of his arms. I rolled off his lap. My knees shook when I landed on my feet. My hand grasped the edge of the truck as all the water I just drank came back up. Remy stepped in next to me, holding me up. My knees gave way completely as I lost all my strength. He supported me before I fell. See what have you let happen to her? You probably could have done so much more, Remy shouted at Engandriel. I'm okay, I said weakly. I patted Remy's hand around my waist. Really, I'm fine. I straightened. Remy tucked me into his side. You have radiation sickness. You are not fine. He cradled my head in his hand and lifted it up to his face. He was so handsome. I loved his hawk nose. He looked over my head back to Engandriel. I'm going to fix this. He lifted me up onto the tailgate of the truck like I was made of air. Engandriel wrapped the blanket back around me. He wrapped an arm around my side and scooted me closer to him. The look Remy shot Engandriel made me think the angel would go up in smoke. Don't let her go anywhere. Engandriel narrowed his eyes at him. They both shared a heated look, and then Remy disintegrated into shadows. After a moment I said, Is everything okay between you two? Engandriel squeezed my shoulder. Don't worry about it. Everything is fine and you're going to be okay. It sounded more like he was trying to convince himself more than me. I just leaned into him, enjoying his aura. I didn't ever get to do this. Felt nice. A few minutes later, the shadows coalesced into Remy. He held a shot in one hand. He leveled another dark look at Engandriel. Lanie, hold out your arm, Remy said. I complied. I liked the way he said my name. He pressed the needle into my arm and plunged the shot. It felt like a knife as it went in. I tried not to flinch. He must have read my expression because I could see an echo of pain in his eyes. I wondered exactly how the three of us were connected. I never gave guardians much thought. Mother treated them more like maids than anything, but maybe they could feel what I felt too. I need to give the sword to Karma, I whispered. Remy frowned. Let me give it to her. You've been through enough today. I shook my head against Engandriel's side. No. She asked me to do it. I don't want her to mess up my karma anymore. I can't risk Mother. Remy scoffed. I stopped. Remy's eyes looked to Engandriel. I felt like they were communicating without saying anything. I tried to shift to look up at Engandriel, but he squeezed me in tighter to his side. Okay, Remy said. He held out his hands to me. Let's go give her the sword. I'll help you summon her. Engandriel's arm tightened around me. Remy pulled at my hands. I felt like I needed to make a decision here before they tore me apart. I lifted my hands towards Remy. Okay, I said. Engandriel let me go. Remy picked me up in his arms while I was still wrapped in the blanket. I felt like a child being fought over by their parents. I leaned my head on Remy's shoulder as he carried me into the forest. His aura wasn't the same as Engandriel. It didn't have the same lightness to it, but it did have the same power. Instead of light, he felt warm. He felt sweet. I breathed in his campfire scent. That was what demons always smelled like. But his had another more earthy scent to it. Something that was uniquely him. I'd always caught a whiff of it when he was teleporting me, but now I really got a chance to enjoy it. We reached the nexus point. The dark stars above sparkled through the pine trees. Remy set me down at the edge of the circle. He fixed a few of the lines and then sat down next to me. I could feel Engandriel walk up behind and tower over us. I lifted my hands palms out towards the circle. I, Elena of the House of Grey, beseech Karma, force of nature. I wish to bestow of gift on her greatness. The purple light flared to life. Karma stepped out of the purple cloud once again. Ah, excellent. Karma stepped forward, ignoring the angel and demon complete. She bent down with her hand extended. My sword. I fished it out of my hoodie pocket. My burnt and cut up hands turned the blade hilt out for her to grab. She grabbed it from me. As soon as it left my hand, I felt empty. I felt as if I was losing a good friend. Grief washed over me and I had to blink a few tears from my eyes. Karma turned back to me with her dark hard eyes. Don't bother me again or I will give you bad karma. She shook the dagger at me. She snapped. The purple light faded, leaving us in the dark again. What a bye, Remy started. Sure, I said, my eyes wide as I turned to him. You're right. Come on. I'll take you home. Remy stood and picked me up. I sagged against him. Between the sickness and the grief, I really didn't care about anything anymore. Engandriel barred his path. Some more unspoken communication passed between them through glares before Remy finally moved past and back to the car. He set me in on the passenger side, then climbed in on the driver's side. Before Remy started the engine, Engandriel opened up the door on my side. He slid me to the center and climbed in. He reached over and belted me tight. They shared another nasty look before Remy slammed the accelerator and the truck started forward. I sank down between my two guardians. I could feel their auras at war with each other but completely syncing with mine. It was such a strange place to be. I wiggled my right hand into Engandriel's big hand. He patted it before holding it. I slid my left hand out from beneath the blankets into Remy's lap. He laced his fingers with mine and squeezed gently. Despite all the pain and grief I felt, there was a piece of me that had never felt more content in my life. Chapter 46. The Deal. A few days later, I was practicing my Krav Maga in the backyard. I had managed to use several salves to cure the radiation burns from my hands. Mother hopefully would never find out about my ordeal, although it seemed as my injuries faded, so had my memories of the event. I couldn't for the life of me remember what it was I went in there to get. As I practiced, the light in the sky was failing, making the forest look particularly dark and menacing. I could feel this pulsating energy coming from the direction of the nexus point. It was like a pounding deep in my chest that thumped and thrummed in with an irregular beat. As all things did that piqued my interest, I followed it. It usually got me into some tight spots, but everything always turned out just fine. I was still here, right? I stepped lightly through the forest, careful not to leave a trace. Not that it mattered, but it was a good practice. The thrumming and pounding slowly started to reach my ears. As I moved closer, the beats started to collide into what might have been considered music. I stood outside the first outer ring of trees. The tall pines towered overhead. I peeked around one huge trunk to see bodies dancing around the next circle of trees. They were naked as they jumped and leapt through the air. Between me and the next set of trees, people stood in black robes. Their mouth hung open as deep rumblings of throat singing vibrated out. The whole thing made my skin crawl. It almost felt similar to when I absorbed power, but this gave my goosebumps. I spotted my mother not far off. She was standing talking to someone just inside the outer rim of trees. I moved around the edge a little more. I didn't want to interrupt, but when I saw Remy standing there, I shrank back a little behind the tree so he wouldn't see me. The conversation looked like it was getting animated, so I snuck behind the trees so I could get closer. I was able to pop in behind the closest pine without being seen. I hunkered down and became very still. I focused my mind and my power on listening. I can't interfere. I don't know how many times I have to tell you that, Remy said. We're talking about your freedom here, Mother said. Remy didn't reply, so she continued. I know you are not as young as you look. You must be tired of doing this work. Do you really want to stick around to see all your charges die? Remy was still silent. I wasn't sure if he was nodding or shaking his head. I couldn't see either of them from behind the tree. I know you appear the age of your charges to gain their trust, but you don't have me fooled. I can read your aura, and yes, you have one even though you're a demon. Don't give me that look. Just take the deal. You'll never get a better offer. Remy exhaled a breath. I don't know. Charges die all the time. You know you aren't supposed to get attached. What does it matter if they live longer or die sooner to you? And in this case, it will be a balance and you'll never have to see it happen. What would I do if I was free? Remy asked. That would be up to you. The world would be your oyster. You'd actually be in it. Would I get a life back? Would I be immortal? Would I keep my powers? I don't know. I can only pull your soul and body back to the real world. What would happen from there would not be my issue. I can only make you alive again. After a bit of silence, Mother continued. Do you really want to do this forever? Watching them live and die in front of you for eternity? I need some time to think about it. The conversation ended. I peeked around the tree and saw only Mother standing there. I waited 5 minutes, then stood and sauntered up with loud footfalls, acting as if I was just strolling in. Mother turned to me with a nasty look. I've taught you better. I nodded but ignored her. What's going on? I took a look around at the throat singers and the dancers. We're preparing for the solstice. That's still 4 days away. Will they be doing this the whole time? Mother nodded. In shifts. We've never done this in past years. It was never this big. She nodded. That is true, but this year is special. We are preparing for the merging. It will be a fantastic sight. Merging? That sounds ominous. Mother sucked in a breath. You don't understand. She turned to me. Look, Lanie, I need you to go out and get some supplies. Take Remy with you. Isn't Remy always with me? She glared at me. Just please do this. Here is the list. Get started on it as quick as possible. Tonight. I looked around the dark forest. She nodded. Fine. I sighed. I'll get right on it. I strode back through the dark forest towards the house. I knew my way without needing to see, but the stars and the filling moon lit my path. Remy, you're supposed to come with me, I said into the night. I wasn't sure if he was lurking around, but at least I told him. When I reached the house, I took a look at the list. 30 alexandrite gems, 30 pearls, 30 living roses, 2 moonstones, rosemary, lavender, dragon's tongue. What is with this list? I said to no one in particular. Well, the best way to get a few of those things was to break into a jewelry store. I knew of at least one in Salt Lake. It was a design place, so it would have a variety of rare gems a regular store wouldn't. I packed a bag with a flashlight and a few other things, then threw my bag in the old pickup truck. I flipped the radio on an old 90s station and started on my way. Chapter 47, Truck Ride. I bumped down the road in the truck in the middle of the night. The squeaky shocks jostled me up and down. I sang to a song on the radio. It had something to do about being a mad world. It made me laugh internally. I did feel like the world was a little mad. Where are you heading? Remy's sudden voice made me jump. To rob a jewelry store. Did you ever actually hear yourself when you talk? What do you mean? Your plans always sound insane. What plans? I asked. Exactly. I'm always stuck saving your ass. I shrug. Isn't that your purpose? Besides, why is it mostly you and not Ingandriel? Isn't he supposed to help out too? I get the feeling he doesn't like me much. Remy frowned. Don't you remember the other night? What do you mean? He took you out and saved you? You had a whole adventure. I shook my head. It felt right, but I couldn't remember anything. Are you sure? You don't remember the sword? He asked. What sword? Huh. I wonder if the veil had something to do with it. I glanced over at him. He was in his typical leather coat. It always looked a little big on him, like he was wearing his dad's coat. The conversation between him and my mother reminded me that maybe that was just his coat, and he only appeared to be 14/15 to me. What a strange concept. It wasn't like the rest of his clothes were baggy or anything. He was always dressed in a black jeans and a black t-shirt. He just seemed like your typical high school-aged kid. What are you going to do about Mom's offer? I asked. He ran his hand through his short black hair. It's tempting. What do you have to do in return? I looked over at him briefly, trying to determine the look on his face. He swung his golden hazel eyes towards me. I have to let some of my charges die. His eyes spoke the truth. I turned my attention back to the road. What are you going to do? My charges are going to die anyway. I mean someday. But the chance to be alive again is beyond my imagination. So go for it, I said. I don't know if that is a good idea coming from you. You're not exactly a planner. I get things done. That's because I save your ass all the time. You do it because you love me, I said sarcastically. An awkward silence filled the cab. I cleared my throat. So are you like really a man? Of course. I mean, you're like 200 years old. Why do you look like a kid? Oh right. No, I'm sort of reborn with my charges. I look like a kid because I sort of am a kid. Not my mind, but my body is. Reborn? So you are a baby when we are. Not really. At 4 years old I kind of shrink back down from being a man to being 4 years old again. Then I grow up from there. And even my mind sort of starts over so I can think similar to the age group. So when you jump from charge to charge you change age? I could see him shake his head out of the corner of my eye. All my charges are born on the same day in the same year. So do you get like all the kids born on June 21st, 1999? No, that would be way too many. I am assigned about 200. It is a lot of work in the beginning, but as they die, the job gets easier. Does Engandriel have the same charges? There is some overlap, but they are not all the same. Blue and red lights flared behind me. Shit. What did you do? Remy asked. I shrugged my shoulders as I slowed down. I don't know. I was always a good driver, despite my recklessness in other areas. I had to pay extra attention to it because everything inside of me wanted to speed, spin, and race down the highway. Mother would not be happy if I got pulled over. I waited for the officer to walk up to the window. I rolled it down and killed the radio. Good evening, young lady, the officer said as the light of his flashlight danced over us. Do you know what I pulled you over for? No, sir. My heart beat hard in my chest. I didn't know why I was so nervous. You have a tail light out and part of your bumper is hanging over the license plate. I'm sorry, sir. It must have fell off again. Can I see your license and registration, please? While I pulled out my fake ID and the registration, he continued. Isn't it past curfew? Yes, sir. My mother sent me and my brother out to check on my grandmother. She called with a night terror. Brother, huh? He flashed the light between us again. You don't look much alike. Remy, show him your license. I held out my hand. Remy looked at me confused. I shook my hand and raised my eyebrows to tell him to play along. He frowned and pretended to put something in my hand. I used a bit of my power and my fantastic power of creativity to morph a business card from the open wallet on my lap into a copy of my license with a few changes on it. I mumbled a few words to complete the spell, then handed it to the cop. He looked between me, Remy, and the cards. Twins, huh? I shrugged. Genetics. Who knows? He handed the cards back. All right, hurry up and get to your grandmother's. Get that tail light and your bumper fixed. Otherwise next time it will be a citation. Yes, sir, I said with a nod. The officer walked away, then drove off. Twin brother? He asked. It was easier to copy. I flipped him the card. He caught it and looked at it closely. That's a very good likeness. You did that in your head? I nodded. That was the easy part. Getting enough ink to change it on the business card was the hard part. I had to steal some from other things. I handed him my wallet. He laughed. I hope you didn't need your health insurance card. He waved it. It's half erased. Of course not, I have you. You know I can't always save you. I am not supposed to interfere. But you can if you accept the deal. He got quiet. What's the trade-off? Charges. They die anyway. I asked. Won't their guardian angels take over? It's a little more complicated than that, but yes, they will be relatively safe. His hand slid across the seat towards mine. His fingers curled around the edge of my hand. No matter what, I will do what I can to protect you. My heart started beating fast. I was glad for the dark so he couldn't see the blush rise to my cheeks. I quickly drew my hand away. Yeah, thanks for that. I hit the radio. The Devil Went Down to Georgia came on and I focused really hard on not thinking about how warm Remy's hand had been over mine. Chapter 48 Heist. I pulled into a parking lot few blocks down from Leon's Original Designs. Remy stayed glued to my side as we walked to the back entrance. I held my hand over the keypad and whispered reveal. As I sent a bit of energy into it, purple glowing bits of oil from fingerprints rose off the keypad in order. I pressed 6490. The light turned green so I opened the door. The back entryway light popped on when the door closed. It was a tight hallway that led to several rooms. I poked my head into each room until I found one that looked to be a storage room. Locked boxes of gems lined the walls. Open, I said. I sent power out into the room. I couldn't see it, but I could feel it. The locks clicked open all at once. I started opening lids and peering inside with my flashlight. Whoever owned this place was incredibly organized. Each box was felt-lined with dividers. The dividers were labeled with gemstone, lot number, size, and other information. It didn't take me long to find the alexandrite and the pearls. I didn't know what size, so I just picked something that had all the same. I removed the divider and the label so it didn't look like too much was missing. Have you seen any moonstone? I asked Remy. I can't help you, you know that. What are you here for? Moral support. I scoffed. I don't need moral support. I need another set of eyes and hands. He held up his hands innocently. That's all I can do. I rolled my eyes. Very helpful. The keypad on the back door beeped 4 times. The back door clicked. I dived behind a stack of boxes. Remy faded into blackness. Where the hell do you think it is? A man asked. His voice was clear as it rang through the hall. I know he is working on it right now. It could be in the Leon's office, a woman's voice answered. Footsteps led into a room. I slipped out from behind my boxes and snuck to the hallway just as the automatic light switched off. I followed the voices and the beams of their flashlights to the office door. Inside, 2 people stood looking around. It's not at the workstation, the lady said. There's a vault here. The man's flashlight illuminated the front dial. Great. Any chance you know the combination? He laughed heartily. She joined him after a second. He pulled his fist back and slammed it into the front of the steel vault door. The door dented in. He continued to pummel at it. She joined in. Neither of them looked to have blood on their hands as they dented in the door. Finally it hung off its hinges. The woman leaned inside and pulled out 2 earrings of opalescent white. She hung them at her ears and laughed. The moonstones were huge and thinly cut. Nice, the man said. I know we have this deal, but let's say you and I take this to a fence instead. I'm sure we can get a better price for them. The woman tilted her head this way and that. Do you think she was lying? He shrugged. Maybe. Usually humans don't know what they are talking about when it comes to spells. She kind of gave me the creeps. I don't know if I'd cross her. Yeah, but think about it. These babies go for 100 million. Isn't that better than some favor by a witch? I mean, yes, she answered. Let's do it. She sniffed the air. Do you smell that? It's a human. I slunk back down the hall. A heavy hand grabbed my shoulder and spun me around. What are you doing here, little girl? The man said. He towered over me. His vice-like grip on my shoulder sent tendrils of pain down my arm and back. I was just spending the night. The door was open. He looked back at his partner. I don't like the look of her. Me either, but she does smell tasty. The woman smacked her lips. I agree, he said as he turned back to me. I tried to pull away as the man dragged me closer to him. The thing about me was I never felt scared until after the fight. I felt a rush of adrenaline, but things never really scared me. I was always able to think and act how I wanted when I got into these tight spots. I flicked my knife out from my pocket and jabbed it into his gut. The knife resisted and slid to the side. It was like the man's skin was made of armor. He chuckled. Nice try, little morsel. The woman grabbed my other arm. Her fingers wrapped tightly around my arm. It felt worse than the blood pressure cuffs on Max. Then they started to pull. She gave me a wicked grin. My arms threatened to pop out of their sockets. I grunted with the pain. Remy, I managed to say around the pain, came out forced. Each breath ached as the nerves in my arms stretched and pulled where they attached to my lungs. Anytime now I thought around the ache. My right arm popped out of its socket. The man laughed as I screamed. The little morsel is almost ready. Pull a little harder. A dark cloud billowed out of the back rooms and down the hall. It flooded the hallway, limiting my view of what I assumed must be orcs. The pain from the pulling subsided, then released completely. I staggered backward, holding my limp right arm. My back hit a wall. I leaned heavily on it as I tried to peer into the dark cloud. A hand reached up and grabbed my left arm, trying to pull me down. The lady's face came into view. Help me, she screeched. I tried to pull my arm away from her grip, which was strong even though she was flailing and screaming. The darkness enveloped her. It wrapped up my arm like a tentacle in a spiral. Searing hot pain threaded through my arm all the way to my shoulder. I screamed. Remy popped in by my side. He pulled me into his side away from the darkness. The darkness receded. I buried my head into his leather jacket as I whimpered. His strong arms wrapped around me, hugging me into him. Shoo! Where were you? I choked out between whimpers. Each inhale brought the scent of him into my nostrils, and with it a little bit of calm. I had another charge. I'm sorry, he whispered into my ear. He stroked my back as I relaxed into him. I knew you were going to be okay. You're very strong. Something about that sentence gave me a catch in the back of my throat. It felt like a marble as I tried to swallow it back down. What was that? I asked, my voice a little on the shaky side. That dark cloud. I don't know. He hugged me tighter as he looked into the hall. I pushed away from him slowly as I tried to compose myself. His fingers let me go, but lingered on my arms as I drew away. My arm ached. I could feel it click and pop as I moved it gingerly. It hurt like a bitch, but I wasn't ready for the pain of replacing it. I turned to the hallway. The automatic light had switched on again. The 2 bodies on the ground were not as they were before. Their bodies were bigger, thicker, and they had pointed, almost floppy ears. Teeth like tusks protruded out the front of their mouths. Are those orcs? I asked. Remy looked down at them, then back at me. Are they not human? They look all weird like monsters. I took a closer look. They look like in the books. Orcs, right? How can you see those? Do they always look like that? I swung a look at him. Can you see them like that normally? He nodded. I knew they were always around us, but I didn't realize they all looked human. Remy shook his head. Something has brought you out of the veil. My mouth drew down in a frown. I knew a little about the veil and how it changed memories. I didn't realize it was so active in my brain. Hadn't he said something about the veil earlier when we were in truck? We should probably get going, Remy said. He disappeared into the vault room for a minute. He was right. I had what I came for. I stooped down to the female's jacket and fished the earrings out of her pockets. I snatched up my bag then headed for the truck. Remy joined me just as I left the store. I felt a wave of relief as I closed the door to the truck. Remy climbed in on the passenger side. Seriously, what was that? I asked. I really don't know. I haven't seen anything like it. He turned to me. I've never seen you scared before. I wasn't scared. You were clinging to me. You were hugging me. I turned the key awkwardly with my left hand. The loud engine turned over rumbling to life and drowned out any response he may have made. He gave me a pointed look. I shrugged at him, then put the car in drive and headed. Chapter 49 marked. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror staring at my skinny yet muscular figure. I had pulled my shirt off and was looking at the weird bump that should be my shoulder. The naked skin beneath the black bra was pale and purple. My left was striped with a red spiral up my arm. It started close together then widened as it went up. It still burned. The thought of that dark cloud sent a shiver down my spine. Remy, I shouted over my shoulder, help me with this. Remy strolled into the bathroom. The edges of his lips twitched into a slight smile. We could do this with your shirt on. Remember what happened last time? Mom ruined my shirt. Just do it. He walked over to my left arm. His finger traced the line from my hand up my arm. What is this? Goosebumps from his touch lit my arm. I think it's from the cloud thing. What do you think it is? He shook his head. It could be what is lifting the veil. He stood in front of me and grabbed my shoulders. Are you ready? I nodded. He pushed me up against the wall. His golden hazel eyes sparkled as they met mine. He hesitated a moment. My eyes drifted down to his lips. My cheeks grew red. He planted a hand on the center of my chest, right above my bra. His other hand grasped my right arm. With a quick motion he pulled my arm in and out. The pop followed by my scream echoed through the bathroom. I collapsed forward. He caught me and pulled me into him. His arms cradled me as I found my feet again. I took my time. I liked the feel of his arms around me. I was being such a sucker, but I couldn't help myself. The scent of him filled my nose again. I buried my head deeper in his shoulder as the ache in mine lessened. He rubbed my naked back with his fingers. Deep breaths, he murmured in my ear. I couldn't help but smile. He thought it hurt worse than it did. I just kept holding on to him. I liked this closeness. No one ever hugged me. Hugging wasn't really a thing between me and Mom. I stood like that as long as I thought I could get away with and pulled away. Is it better? I nodded. Thanks. He hesitated again. I could feel him almost holding his breath. I looked up into his eyes. I never noticed the flecks of gold in them. He lifted his hand and brushed at my jaw. Dirt, he said. Mom, what is going on in here? Mother said. I jumped so bad I smacked into the wall behind me, jostling my shoulder. I crumpled forward again, landing back into Remy's arms. Remy took it in stride. Dislocated shoulder. I see. Where did you go first? She asked. Gem store, he answered. Good. Where are they? Backpack, he said. She arched an eyebrow at us then turned to leave. Get the other items soon. I don't want you waiting until the last minute like usual, she said as she walked away. I looked up and was surprised by the giggle that escaped my lips. I clasped my hand over my mouth to shut it down. Remy smiled. He brushed a stray lock from my face with a finger. Why don't you shower? I'll get you some ice for that shoulder. His arms fell away. He closed the door behind him as he walked out. I suddenly felt cold. It was nice having him that close. I don't think I actually enjoyed anything more in my life. I mean, I enjoyed things. I enjoyed my practice fighting, shooting, cookies, and other things like that, but this feel was addictive. I peeled off the rest of my clothes and climbed in the shower. As I scrubbed, I noted my numerous bruises and fresh scratches. That was common. But my mind again landed on the mysterious spiral. Felt strange, like it had always been there. With that thought it shimmered white. I blinked. Did I really just see that? I continued to stare, but it stayed its original red color. I snapped out of it and finished up my shower quickly. I dried and covered up with a towel before I opened the bathroom door. Remy lay on my bed reading a book. It was nothing new, but the image of him there tonight made my insides tight. That took you a while, he said. I think this mark turned white. He set the book down. Really? I think so, at least. Maybe I'm seeing things. It's only 4 a.m. You're not tired already, are you? He asked. I kind of am. Did you get the ice? He disintegrated into shadows. I took that moment to don a pair of plaid flannel shorts and a tank top for pajamas. I looked in the mirror. I was never self-conscious before, but now I couldn't stop myself. I didn't like my skinny figure in the mirror. It looked like I was trying too hard. I pulled a hoodie over my head. It covered most of the clothing and drowned me in its fabrics. That felt better. Remy coalesced behind me. I spun to see him sitting on the bed. He patted the spot next to him. I crawled onto the tall bed and lay face down. The weight of the ice pack pressed down on my shoulder. Slowly the cold seeped in. I don't think the sweatshirt was a good choice. I tried to shrug but couldn't move too much. He gently lifted my right shoulder and pushed another ice pack between me and the bed. I'm sorry I wasn't there sooner. He ran his fingers over the ice pack then across my back. But you're always there, I mumbled into the folds of the bed. I know. I just wasn't there this time. You almost got torn apart. Orcs like to play with their food first. I'm sorry you got caught in the middle. He rubbed my back with the palm of his hand. The knots beneath his hand screamed with pain and pleasure. I was always knotted up from all the practice I did. This felt like utter heaven. No one had ever given me a massage before, let alone Remy. After a long time I asked, Remy? Yeah, he said absently. Are you okay? He continued to rub my back without answering. After a minute he finally said, I think I'm going to take the deal. What changed? He chuckled softly, a reminder that he was older than he looked. Nothing really. Everything is the same as it has always been. I just realized something. Realized what? I said sleepily. He pulled the ice packs off of me. I rolled onto my left shoulder to better see his face. A slight smile touched his lips as he looked down at me. Come on, let's get you to bed. He pulled the covers back for me to slide in. Once I was settled, he tucked them up under my chin. This must have been what it felt like when a child was being tucked in by a parent. I liked it. Realized what? I repeated. He smiled gently and brushed the hair from my eyes. Sleep tight, little one. He walked to the window and pulled the blackout curtain shut, blocking the view of the rising sun. Remy, I whispered. Don't leave. I didn't like the darkness. My voice was small and childlike. I'm always right here. His figure transformed into shadows and he disappeared. Chapter 50. I woke in the afternoon around 2 o'clock. My shoulder ached, but it wasn't as bad as it could have been. My back actually felt fairly relaxed. I ate a blueberry muffin for breakfast, then dressed in a pair of jogging pants and a tank top. After my daily run I rinsed, dressed in my normal jeans and a t-shirt, then hopped in my truck. It didn't take me long to get the normal herbs, but the home improvement store looked at me funny when I drove off with 30 small rose bushes. By 6, I had the plants unloaded in the backyard. Various people, some naked, some robed, came and then disappeared with them back into the forest. I was starting to notice strange features about some of them. One robed figure had goat feet. Another woman had pointed ears. There was a naked man that was completely pink. I tried not to stare, but eyes probably lingered longer than was normal. I had some time to kill while I waited for the mystical herb shop to open, so ate some dinner. I cooked up a bit of instant noodles and sat at the table slurping the hot ramen. Remy coalesced in front of me. Hey. He nodded his head once in greeting. Does accepting the deal mean you'll be hanging around more? He shrugged. I don't know. I don't have my freedom yet. I slurped at my noodles. Will you be excited to eat food again? I eat food now. I cocked an eyebrow at him. I thought you were dead. I am. I have like a shadow body, but even shadow bodies need sustenance. I just live on a different plane of existence. I have to sleep and eat there, and I come here for work. If having charges is just a job, then why don't you quit? Why do you have to make a deal? I don't have a choice to quit. Think of it more as enslavement. When I don't do what I am supposed to, the way I am supposed to, I get yanked back to the dark side. Hell. Sure. Is it all flames and devils? More Dante's Inferno meets a corporate world. I nodded. I had to read Dante's Inferno as one of my assignments from Mother. I didn't intake a lot of it, but the simplified notes online made it easier to understand. When they yank you back, what happens? They torture me until I am obedient again. Time works differently in different realms. That is why I am 200 years old about. I haven't actually lived 200 years per se, but my soul has. When did you die? Like here in this world? January 1999. I was 21. Wow, really? Am I your first charge? He nodded. Whoa, wait, really? He nodded again. Are you this close to all your charges? None of my charges remember me because of the veil. But you're different. Your mother has prepared you to work outside the veil. Your mind remembers more of it. Mother walked into the room, drawing our attention away from the conversation. Have you gotten everything on the list yet? I shook my head. I was waiting for the herb shop to open, then I will have the rest of it. Her eyes darted to the clock on the wall. You can leave now. It will be open by the time you get there. I nodded. Yes, ma'am. Isabel turned on her heel and left. My eyes followed after her. A bit of longing and an edge of bitterness filled me. She was always like that, curt and straight to the point. She never had an ounce of compassion. I guess I should get going. Are you going to come with? I asked Remy as I stood. He shrugged. Sure. You don't have other charges to save? He wrapped an arm gently around my shoulders, then leaned in and whispered. Is that jealousy I hear? A blush rose to my cheeks. What? Of course not. It most certainly was. I reveled in his touch and his breath in my ear. We started walking towards the front door. He let his hand fall as he fell in step behind me. I had to get a grip. There was no way this was going to work out. And there was no way he felt the same. He was just messing with me. And I was just lonely. I pushed all those thoughts aside. You fixed the truck, I stated, looking at the bumper wired up. Remy scratched the back of his head with his hand. Yeah, I didn't want you getting pulled over again. I didn't realize how annoying it was to change a tail light. Thanks. Don't mention it. I climbed into the truck. Remy hopped in. The metal doors creaked as they shut. The radio started as the engine roared to life. The song on the radio played. Hey there, Delilah. My cheeks burned red. I didn't dare change it, or he might pick up on my discomfort. He might know what I was thinking. I kept my eyes on the road. The radio switched from song to song. Each one seemed to make me squirm even more. So many of them were about confessing their love. Why couldn't I get a sad song or one about drugs or anything else right now? You're speeding. Remy's voice broke into my thoughts. I released the accelerator. The truck costed back down to a comfortable 65 mph. What's got you so distracted? He asked. He kept his eyes on the road. Nothing. He chuckled. I glansde over. He was grinning. What are you thinking about? I asked sarcastically. He turned to me. You. My cheeks filled with color. I snapped my eyes back to the road. Stop messing with me. He laughed. I'm not messing with you. I'm wondering about what has you distracted. That's thinking about you. I changed the subject quickly. I'm wondering what this ritual is all about. It's not like the previous solstice festivals. This one feels like Mom is gearing up for something big. But you know her, she never tells me anything. Do you know what is going on? I don't. She has been keeping me at arm's length too. I have a bad feeling about it. He turned to me again. You do. I nodded. It's like a deep pit in my stomach. I don't know. I think something is going to go wrong. Or go right, he mumbled. More clearly he said, don't worry. I'll look into it. I wanted to feel relief, but instead my stomach just sank a little deeper. Chapter 51, Emporium. I pulled the truck into the small parking lot. The store looked like one of those hippie bong stores. I jumped out, then stuffed my wallet in my back pocket. Remy walked with me to the door. As soon as we entered, the strong smell of herbs and other plants overwhelmed my nostrils. Remy split away from me as I browsed the numerous shelves. They were laden with glass apparatus, herbs, plants, crystals, gems, chicken feet, and a host of other items. It was the biggest magical supply emporium in the West. I was sure it had something to do with being so close to a major nexus point. I wandered through the cramped maze of shelves. One man stood staring at a shelf right next to the dragon's tongue. I moved in closer. The man looked up at me. He was short with purple skin and rounded mousy ears on top of his head. I tried not to stare, but I caught him looking at my left arm. I reached over to get the dragon's tongue. He stared hard at the red spiral on my arm. His mouth gaped. I realized he was trying to form words but couldn't get them out. I pulled my arm back and looked at him. You're fracture, he stammered. What? I gave him a confused look. He dropped his basket of herbs and ran. I watched him disappear out the door. I looked back down at my arm. I wasn't sure what had just happened. A fracture? What the hell was that? Remy walked up next to me. What was that all about? He called me a fracture. Well, that was rude. What does that mean? I asked. He shrugged. He seemed really scared. He wrapped an arm around my shoulders and leaned in. His breath on my ear sent shivers down my spine. He should be. You're a deadly weapon. All you do is train. My body was getting hot again. I turned my thoughts away from the weird encounter. That is true. I even let a giggle slip. I covered my mouth quickly and turned it into a cough. As Remy released me, his fingers trailed down my arm. I couldn't tell if it was intentional, or if my mind was just grasping for something that wasn't there. Dragon's tongue. Remy asked. What else is on the list? Cat whiskers, foxglove, pink moss, and dragon's teeth. The herb are actually teeth? He asked. Teeth, I answered. He wrinkled his nose. That's going to be spendy. I shrugged. It's her money. It's in your pocket, he said. I felt a pull at my back jeans pocket. I looked back over my shoulder. He held my wallet up between two fingers, winked at me, then walked off. I stared after him. This was flirting, right? He was flirting with me. I was so confused. He'd never spent this much time with me before, and this? I didn't know. I didn't have any friends. Mom kept me isolated. Maybe this was just how friends were. I closed my eyes and focused. It was hard getting my heart under control, but I managed. I snatched up the dragon's tongue and the pink moss, then joined Remy at the counter. I see you have quite the party plan for the solstice, the clerk said with a smile. His gray hair was long and tied back. I shrugged. I'm just the delivery girl. With an interesting companion, I see. He leaned in conspiratorially. What do you have as a sacrifice? It must be pretty big. I arched an eyebrow at him. You have enough stuff here to knock out an elephant. That would be a fine sacrifice to Juno. I cringed but tried to hide it. Remy shared a quick glance at me, then squeezed my hand under the view of the counter. Yeah, Mom seems to have some very big plans. Have you seen what they have cooking up at the Nexus? I hear it's going to be wild. I shook my head. I have no idea. I didn't even have to lie. I really didn't know what she was up to. It's going to be fun. I might even pop by and see the fireworks. He leaned back and looked at the register. That will be $3,556.96 and 30,000 jowls. Remy held my wallet out to me. I pulled it from his hand and produced $4,000 bills. The clerk pushed forward a pink crystal. Fill this. I set my hand on the crystal. Instantly I could feel the pull on my power. My energy sapped and my knees buckled. Remy caught me before I went down. My goodness, you are a powerful kid. The clerk gave me a wink. That's good. We need strong souls these days. The crystal glowed and freed my hand. I shook out the numbness it left. Remy's arm still held me about my waist even though I found my feet. Thanks, I muttered. The clerk wrapped up the herbs, then pushed them across the counter. Happy solstice. Happy solstice, I said without the cheer. Remy shot him a glare, then turned me about. We walked out the door and back to the truck. I was not expecting that to be so expensive, I said as I leaned heavily on the truck. Are you okay? Your mother should not have made you do that. His face loomed in front of mine. My vision was blurry around the edges. His forehead wrinkled in worry. It's okay. She wouldn't have sent me if I couldn't pay it. You shouldn't have to pay it, he grumbled. We had one of those moments again where he got silent and stared at me. I might have actually gone for it this time if I wasn't so dang tired. My head drooped and my knees buckled again. He caught me about the waist with one hand and pulled my arm up around his neck with the other. I tried to hang on, but I felt so weak. I think I better drive, he said. Can you do that? You'll be interacting with the world continuously. My voice came out slow and slurred. Just don't fall asleep on me. I may need your help. He opened the truck door and lifted me into his arms. No promises, I said. He pushed me up onto the seat and buckled me. My head drooped forward. I may have imagined it before I completely lost consciousness, but I was pretty sure I felt him kiss my forehead. Chapter 52, Fracture. I woke up back in my bed. I was fully clothed but with no shoes. The covers were tucked up tight under my chin, which was sweet of Remy, but I was boiling hot beneath. The sudden thought that he was sweet wasn't helping that heat either. My limbs felt heavy when I tried to move them. It was similar to when I did a rigorous training session but without all the soreness. My shoulders still ached though. I pushed the covers back and sat up slowly. It felt like the room was spinning. I don't think I had ever used up so much power at once. I knew it took a while to regenerate. A weight settled down next to me on the bed as the shadows grew into a shape. I flipped the nightstand lamp on, then turned to see Remy looking rather serious. What's wrong? I asked. I think your mother has something planned for you. I quirked an eyebrow. That's nothing new. She always has plans for me. No, I mean with this ritual. I think it's about you. Really? She's never included me in anything like that before. She just tells me to train and fills me up with demon power. That's what I'm worried about. The look of concern on his face for me melted my heart. I think she's going to use you like a battery. That is also nothing new. You saw, she just used me to buy that stuff. I think she is going to sacrifice you. I got quiet. My mind mulled it over, but I just couldn't quite seem to think about it. It was like my mind was stuck in shock maybe. Lanie, Remy asked. Are you okay? I don't know. I turned to him. Does it make sense? Did she power me up to sacrifice me? Remy's face grew grim. At least if we know, we can prepare. He grabbed my hand. Why don't you look through the books in her library? I'm going to go ask around and observe. I'll see if I can get any more information. Then we can come up with a plan. Okay. I felt like my movements were wooden as I shook my head. Remy slid off the bed. He hesitated before he stepped away. He turned to me, bent down and planted a kiss on my lips. Before I could react, he disintegrated into shadows. My mouth hung ajar. My fingers slowly lifted and pressed to my lips as my mind reenacted the moment. As my fingers pressed lightly on my lips for a moment, my mind tried to confirm that it was actually a kiss and not a mistake. I closed my eyes tight. As I opened them, I pushed that thought from my mind and focused on the more important one. Was Mother trying to kill me? I didn't even know how to feel about that. It was so incomprehensible. I padded to the library in my socks. I picked out several thick leather-bound books from the countless ones on the shelves. I couldn't read their titles. I wasn't great at languages, but I knew enough of them to get the gist of it. I sat at the table and turned the lamp on. Then I started my quest. A few hours and 20 volumes later, I sat on the floor surrounded by open books. I kept coming across this weird phrasing. It was in a dozen languages. Each one included the word darkness and broken, which sometimes translated into split, or half. All of it was centered around the solstices, either summer or winter. The ritual seemed to be a power transfer, which wasn't uncommon. That was what most rituals were. But this one seemed to be able to amplify the power by tuning it to the Earth's power or planet's power or something. I kept getting confused. I hated not being able to comprehend all this high-level stuff. I didn't like feeling dumb, who did, but I knew that this was just beyond me. I wished I had someone here to help. Just as I finished that thought, Remy appeared before me. He tiptoed through the books, pushed one aside, then sat down cross-legged next to me. Any luck? Can you read this stuff? He shook his head. I only know English and bad English. I chuckled as he quoted one of my favorite moves. Then I stopped. That was a ritual. For elements in a person. That was a transfer of power into a weapon. My fingers flew to one of the open books. A complex wheel within wheel and crossing lines pattern filled one side of the page. The fifth element was a person, I stated. Yeah, and there is only a place for one person in these spells, but it keeps talking about a split. Like, a fracture? Remy whispered. I glanced down at my arm. A fracture. My fingers read over the lines of the ancient languages. Solstice huge more power combine fracture soul amplify network lines. I groaned. Why is this so hard? Remy's hand closed around mine. It's okay, just keep going. He moved my finger to the next word. Warning control darkness predict anger balance tip soul must maintain balance realms. I flopped back in frustration. I can't do this. I'm only get like every other word. This is so convoluted. Remy squeezed my shoulder. It's okay. Let's just try to put it into context based on what we know. You said darkness, right? Well, we definitely found some darkness yesterday. It sounds like a prediction that is warning that if the darkness interrupts this ritual, then the balance between light and dark will be tipped. I wrinkled my nose. I guess. If you can even trust what I have translated. I think your translation is fine. It's just not complete. Now the first one. It looks like you have to combine the fractured soul. That's something. We just need to figure out what she is trying to combine you with. If I'm a fractured soul, then where's the rest of me? My voice got a little creaky towards the end. I didn't realize it at first, but this fracture thing was a little scary. Remy got quiet. I have to go, he said suddenly, and just like that he was gone. Chapter 53 Solstice. I didn't see Remy for the rest of the evening nor for the next 2 days. The solstice was tomorrow and my birthday was today. I spent my time studying books upon books. I focused on anything that said fracture. I had a feeling I was on my own for this. After day 1 I was still hopeful, but on day 2, no matter how many times I called, Remy did not appear. I flipped open the book I took from my mother's library. It was getting harder to call her mother. She never really treated me like a daughter. There was no love between us. I was more of a slave. And now my distrust in her was growing. I sat in my truck in front of the Emporium as I pored over the pages. I really hoped I was getting this right. I had found a fracture spell to split a person into mind, body, and soul. It was close enough to the solstice spell, all I had to do was reverse it, at least that's what it looked like. I squeezed my eyes shut. My brain hurt from all of this. I wanted so much to be able to do this, but I just felt like I couldn't process. I felt overloaded. I opened back up my eyes and wrote a list of ingredients. I stepped down from the truck with my backpack over my shoulder. I shuffled into the store quickly. The store was getting busier with the solstice tomorrow. I wore a long-sleeved shirt to cover up the spiral. I didn't want anyone else gawking at it. It made me nervous just having it on my arm. If I was some item for a spell, anyone might want me. I pulled a few herbs off the shelf. Some of them were decoys, so the clerk didn't ask too many questions, but I did need one thing in particular. I walked up to the counter with my basket. "Oh, hello again. How are your preparations coming?" he asked. I nodded in greeting. "Just fine. I'm just picking a few items per our usual. And I do need an anchor from a ship lost at sea." He nodded. "Of course." He pulled the other objects of my basket and rung them up. "That will be $568.82 and 1,000 jowls." He pushed a small green crystal towards me. I handed him the money and transferred the power. He wrapped up the herbs and other items, then hefted the anchor across the counter towards me. "Thanks." I put the items in my backpack and tucked the anchor up under my arm. A few people glanced at me as I walked by, but none of their eyes lingered. I drove home. I didn't turn the radio on. I needed to think. I had to get the words to the spell right. I had to get my mind focused. By the time I got home, I was even more tangled up than before. I dumped the useless ingredients on the counter and stuffed the rest, along with the anchor and the book, in my backpack. I slung it over my shoulder, then headed outside to the backyard. I dropped the backpack in the middle of the grass. I decided to start with Tai Chi. I cleared my mind and moved through the movements slowly. Eventually movements turned to thoughts. The rhythm of my movements directed the course of my thoughts. All I had to do was reverse the spell. I had to remove the power. I had to turn the flow. These three things ran through my mind. The night spun on as I worked through the movements, adding in bits of other martial arts from there. Before long, I was flipping across the lawn and up over my backpack. "Lanie," Mother's voice called from the edge of the forest. I stopped my movement. I bit back a snide comment, cleared my head, and turned to her with a blank expression. "Come with me." I snatched up my backpack, then followed her cloaked form into the dark forest. This was it. I was on my own. I had to make this happen or else I was done for. Torches lit the woods. As we approached the outer circle, hooded forms came into view. The deep hum of throat singing filled the trees. The power here made the hair on my arms and legs stand on end. "Mother, shouldn't this wait until tomorrow night?" She didn't answer. I continued to follow her into the woods. We passed the second circle of trees. Naked figures danced and moved. This time they were in unison. It was eerie, like they were one entity of one mind. We passed the inner circle of trees. The 10 pines stood skinny and short. The complex circle pattern covered the ground in deep grooves. The rose bushes I had bought were planted around at intersecting points. Gemstones glittered in the firelight. "Walk to the center," Mother ordered. My heart jumped in my throat. This was it. I had to get this right. I walked to the center of the giant circle. A giant stake taller than my head stood at the center. "Remy," Mother said. I turned to face her. Remy coalesced beside me. His face was stony, but his eyes were pained. He took my hand and tied a rope around my wrist. "Don't do this," I whispered. He was gentle, but he tied the rope firmly to the stake behind my back, then did my other arm. "Please don't do this," I begged. He squeezed his eyes shut, then turned away. He walked 2 steps, then disappeared into a shadow. A moment later, someone was tied behind me. I could hear their frantic, muffled whines. They must have been gagged. Their hands were tied above mine behind my back. The anchor dug into my back through the backpack. I cleared my mind. I tried to calm my breathing and my heartbeat. This was it. I had to get this right. Hooded figures closed in. Remy stood to Mother's side. Mother stood at the edge of the circle, where the caster usually stood to transfer power. The naked figures continued to dance behind her. The throat singing increased, vibrating the air in pulses. Mother lifted her arms above her head. "Juno, Mother of the Gemini, I offer up this soul. Grant me the power tenfold. Grant me the power of the Mother. I ask to thee. Bless me in trade for these offering on the birthing night." Green light flared through the runes dug in the ground. The gemstones glittered. The herbs broke apart, releasing their scent. The roses flared to life with huge blooms. "Juno, I screamed. Mother of the Gemini! I offer up this soul. Split this woman mind, body and soul. Send her to Hades, send her to madness, send her hell. I trade you these offering in which I have procured with my own blood, sweat and power. My voice screamed through the forest. The throat singing abruptly halted. The naked dancers fell in fleshy heaps. Mother stood frozen with a look of horror on her face and her arms in the sky. The earth rumbled beneath my feet. The green light of the runes turned pink, then coalesced into a figure. As the light faded, the figure turned solid. She wore a pink gown over pearly white skin. Her ears were pointed and partially hidden under long pale blonde hair. The fabric looked to be made out of glittering light. It clung to her form as she moved. Her hips were wide and her legs curvy as they moved out of the slit with each step. She turned between me and my mother. My, what a solstice we have here. She clapped her hands. A battle between mother and daughter. How fantastic. Her melodic voice rang like a lullaby. It was hard to concentrate. I tried to speak. I wanted to plead my case, but my throat was closed up. No matter what I did, I couldn't get words past my lips. Juno walked around the circle. As she touched the roses, they flared even larger. She looked between me and Remy. And budding love? My goodness, how exciting. She walked to my mother. She cocked her head to the side as she looked at her. My mother's arms started shaking, but it looked like she couldn't move them. She was trying to speak too, but nothing came out. Juno flicked her hand in front of my mother. You don't need to say anything. I can read your aura. I know what you offer. She looked back over her shoulder at me. I also know what you have to offer, little one. Now the choice is up to me. She placed her hand on the side of my mother's face. I see. Her voice drifted to me as if it was far away. Juno walked over to me next. She placed a cool hand on the side of my face, then laughed. I could feel her digging through my mind. I felt violated. Oh my, so much you do not know, little one. How exciting. She withdrew her hand from my face and started doing rapid little claps. What a play you've brought me. How fun. I don't think I want this to be over so soon. She looked between me and my mother. She snapped her fingers. Mother's mouth twisted as a scream rose from her throat. Her arms remained upright. A golden sliver of cloud slipped from her mouth as the scream filled the forest. It shook me down to my very core. A dark cloud billowed around her as the soul slipped upward towards the sky. Juno snapped again and all three vanished, including Remy with them. Juno turned back to me. Shall I grant your mother's last request as well? I do think this will make this more fun. She leaned in closer and whispered. Do you know what she requested? She giggled. It wasn't very nice. She said, split that bitch. Not very nice, is it? She cocked her head to the side again. But that sounds like so much fun. And we have to be fair. Yes, that would be fair. She snapped again. My soul rose up from my own center through my throat and out my mouth. I watched it slip away into the sky. It was like losing a limb. No, it was more. I was losing myself. I watched it leave. My head dropped suddenly and everything went dark. Chapter 54. Lost. I found myself in the dark. I felt strange. I tried to feel. I tried to tap my chest, but there was nothing there. I couldn't touch anything. My feet weren't on anything either. I was floating like I was in water. But I was breathing. Or was I? I looked around. The more I strained my eyes, the less I saw. It was just dark. I tried to will myself to move. I couldn't tell if I was or wasn't. There was no sensation. I gave that up pretty quick. The last thing I remembered was seeing my soul leave my body. Maybe this was it. Maybe this was death. I reeled. I recounted all the events. When I finished, I did it again. When I finished with that, I had nothing to do. So well, I did it from further back until I was recounting my whole life. And then I did it again. It was all I had to do. I just contemplated my whole just barely 15 years of life over and over again. With each iteration, feelings flared to life. With every repeat, they grew stronger. At the end of each iteration, I was filled with so much hate. I hated Isabel. She was no longer mother. I hated Remy. He had left me. He had betrayed me. I still couldn't work through the spells in my head. I only saw them. I couldn't think anything new. All I could do was replay it over and over. If I still had a mind, I would have gone crazy. Instead, I just felt the emotions. I could have floated there for eons. I could have been there for 10 minutes. Time meant nothing. All I had was my memories and feelings. Then I was feeling something new. A pulling sensation. It dragged me. Up or down, I couldn't tell, but it was almost inward, or was it outward? I wasn't sure. I was slammed back into my body. The sudden sensations were overwhelming. I crumpled into a heap. I felt everything. I felt pain. I felt my blood pumping. I felt breathing. I was alive. My breath shuddered as I gulped in the air. Memories flooded me. They were mine, but they weren't mine. They were from my body. I had a body again. Someone was saying something. They were shining a light on me. I couldn't see beyond the light. I looked up at them. What the fuck? The woman shouted as she stumbled backward and fell. There was something about her voice that was oddly familiar. It wasn't Isabel. Can you get this light out of my eyes? I asked her. I tried to lean out of the way of the harsh light. My arms were tied down. Wait, and I knew why. Those memories, they were from my body. My body was in an insane asylum. I had been crazy. Of course I had been crazy. I didn't have a soul. The woman finally tilted the flashlight down. Who are you? She asked. I shook the blonde hair out of my eyes. It was so nice to have hair again, except it was long. Lanie. Why do you look like me? I looked like her? What? Look, can you just get this off of me? I squirmed. I wanted to be able to feel again. This straitjacket was so restrictive. How do I know I can trust you? This woman was pissing me off. Look, trust me, don't trust me. I don't care. Just get me out of this thing. The lady looked around. Was she an idiot? What was she waiting for? I wiggled. I couldn't wait to just open and close my hands again. I needed to move. I sighed heavily as I waited for her to make a decision. Okay, fine, but no funny stuff. I snorted. If I wanted to kill this woman, I would be able to do it in a second. I was smaller and faster. She was old and slow. Yeah, sure. You just summoned me and you think I'm the one doing funny stuff. She loosened the buckles. I could finally breathe again. The jacket came up over my head and I was naked. Whoa, and I had breasts. What the hell? I covered them with my arms. They were like sizable too. Not huge, but not like before. Do you happen to have a shirt? Oh, yes. Here. She pulled the black sweatshirt over her head, then reached out with it. Thanks. I slipped it on over my head. My hands were so much bigger than I remembered. This was such an odd sensation. This body was mine, but it was older. I stood and brushed the dirt and leaves off the white pants. I turned to her. She clearly wanted something. If she was powerful enough to summon me from across existence, she didn't do it for nothing. Now that you've brought me all the way here, what can I do for you? She blinked. What? You summoned me. I did. Was this girl completely stupid? You just did some top-level magic shit, and you don't even know why you did it? Wait. I snatched up a fallen flip phone. Next to it was a crumpled piece of paper. I grabbed that too, then shined the light on her face. Whoa. Holy shit. What? You do look like me. I touched her face. She was me, but she was older. This is what I looked like now. She stepped away from me. I couldn't believe it. Who's your father? Daniel Hatfield. I shook my head. I didn't recognize the name. And your mother? Isabel Gray. Damn, she was my sister. She was my twin. She was my other half. She was all the bad things Isabel had locked away in me. Pandora. I whispered in realization. What? Never mind. Where's Mila? Who's Mila? My friend, well, sister. She shook her head. This spell was supposed to expel the darkness living inside her. The darkness? The dark cloud? It was here too. I held up the phone and illuminated the circle. This is clearly a summoning circle. How can you not see that? Even says to summon your sister. I held the paper out to her. Mila is my sister. Well, I just found out we share a father. I shook my head. So she was my sister too. What had Isabel gotten us into? It's to summon me. I'm your sister. You didn't share a womb with her, only the seed. We share both. We're twins. My twin's face went white. What happened to Mila? I held the paper to her chest. You traded her in for me. And I never even got the chance to meet her. I what? No, wait. What? I pointed to the paper. Right here. You offered up your friend's soul in trade to find me. That was the power it took to bring me here. She definitely was all the worst parts of me. She was slow and stupid. She shook her head. No, I didn't. No. I was trying to save her. She looked like she was going to cry. Poor thing. She never had a chance without my good parts. I cringed. Where is she? She whined. I tried to summon up some compassion. It wasn't really my thing, but I did try. I shook my head. She's dead. Well, worse actually. She doesn't exist anymore. Her soul was used as power. It's neither dead nor alive. It's just gone. My twin fell to the ground in a heap like a 5-year-old. She held her knees to her chest. Remy. She called. Remy, Remy, she begged. Remy. I looked around. Like Remy? Tall, dark, and full of trouble, Remy. My heart jumped at the thought of seeing him again, and then my hatred took over. I covered her mouth. Her tears ran over my hand. It took all of my control not to shake them off. Don't speak his name. Is he the one who got you to do this spell? She nodded. Motherfuck. Remy was still helping her. She brought me back to finish the spell. Look, don't trust Remy. Not a single word he says. He's a self-interested bastard. If you're going to blame someone for your friend's death, blame him. You've been set up. She pulled away. It must be a mistake. I grabbed her arm and pulled her up to her feet. Come on. We need to get somewhere safe. Do you have a house or something? An apartment. Okay, let's go. I collected up 2 fallen backpacks before we left. Any evidence I could collect would be helpful if I was going to figure out what the hell Isabel had planned.